In 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. The blast and subsequent fire released 400 times more radiation than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The surrounding area was declared uninhabitable. 350,000 people were permanently evacuated. The 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant was supposed to become a dead zone, a sterile, poised wasteland where nothing could live. That is not what happened. Instead, the Chernobyl exclusion zone is now one of the most biodiverse wildlife areas in Europe. Animals are not just surviving there. Some of them are thriving in ways that are forcing scientists to completely rethink what radiation does to living things and what life is actually capable of. This is every animal thriving in radioactive zones, explained. Our next radioactive creature is the eastern tree frog, Gila orientalis. The eastern tree frog is normally bright green. It is one of the most visually distinctive amphibians in Europe. Inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone, almost every eastern tree frog is jet black. A 2022 study documented this transformation across dozens of populations inside the zone compared to frogs outside it. The frogs inside the most radioactive areas had significantly higher concentrations of melanin in their skin, the same radiation-absorbing pigment found in the black fungi growing in the reactor. The darker the frog, the better the melanin absorption, the greater the protection from ionizing radiation. This color shift has occurred in less than 40 years. Roughly 10 to 15 frog generations. It is one of the fastest documented cases of natural selection in a vertebrate animal in recorded scientific history. The green frogs in radioactive zones were less likely to survive and reproduce. The darker frogs survived better. Their offspring were darker. Generation by generation, the population turned black. Darwin described natural selection as a slow process measured in geologic time. The Chernobyl frogs are doing it in decades. First on our list is the Chernobyl wolf Canis lupus. Wolves were among the first large predators to return to the Chernobyl exclusion zone after the evacuation. Today, wolf density inside the zone is 7 times higher than in surrounding protected nature reserves. There is no hunting and no human encroachment. For a wolf, Chernobyl is paradise, if you can handle the radiation. In 2024, researchers at Princeton University published a landmark study. They had been fitting Chernobyl wolves with GPS collars and radiation dosimeters for years, tracking not just where they went, but how much radiation their bodies absorbed daily. The wolves were absorbing radiation doses that would be lethal to humans, chronically every single day of their lives. And inside the wolves' genomes, something remarkable was happening. The researchers identified specific regions of DNA that appeared to be functionally different in Chernobyl wolves compared to unexposed populations. Regions associated with cancer resistance. The wolves' immune system showed modifications similar to those seen in cancer. Survivors who have undergone radiation therapy, their bodies appeared to be actively compensating for the DNA damage radiation causes. They are not just surviving the radiation. Some of them may be evolving resistance to it in real time. Within roughly 15 wolf generations since 1986, radiotrophic fungi, Cladosporium spherospermum. In 1991, scientists sent a robot into the ruins of reactor number 4 at Chernobyl, the most radioactive place on Earth. The robot found something growing on the walls of the reactor itself, black fungi, growing directly on the most intensely irradiated surfaces in the building, in complete darkness, with no food source visible. Further analysis revealed something that rewrote the understanding of what life can eat. These fungi are not merely tolerating the radiation, they are consuming it. Using a pigment called melanin, the same compound that gives human skin its color, they convert gamma radiation directly into chemical energy. The way plants use chlorophyll to convert sunlight into energy through photosynthesis. These fungi use melanin to convert ionizing radiation into biological fuel through a process called radiosynthesis. They grow toward radiation sources. They actively seek the highest dose environments they can find. When NASA tested them on the International Space Station, they not only survived, they grew faster in the higher radiation environment of low Earth orbit than they did on the ground. There is a life form growing inside the most destroyed nuclear reactor in history. It is eating the radiation, and it is thriving. In 1956, a can of meat was exposed to what scientists believed was a sterilizing dose of gamma radiation, enough to kill every known microorganism. When the can was opened, the meat had spoiled. Something had survived. That something was Deinococcus Radiodurans, now nicknamed the Conan bacterium, after the fictional character known for surviving anything. It holds the Guinness World Record for the most radiation-resistant organism on Earth. It can survive 1.5 million rads of radiation. For context, 1,000 rads will kill a human being. 10,000 rads will kill most insects. This bacterium survives 1.5 million. When radiation shatters its DNA, breaking it into hundreds of fragments, Deinococcus Radiodurans reassembles its entire genome from scratch within hours, using a repair mechanism so efficient it makes virtually zero errors. Scientists have blasted it with radiation until its chromosome was in 150 separate pieces. Within 24 hours, it had rebuilt a functional genome and resumed normal activity. NASA is studying it as the basis for radiation-resistant organisms that could survive interplanetary travel. It has also been engineered to digest radioactive waste at contaminated sites. The most indestructible bacterium ever found is now being used to clean up our nuclear accidents. Directly beneath the destroyed reactor number 4 at Chernobyl sits the cooling pond, a large body of water used to regulate reactor temperatures. It is one of the most radioactively contaminated bodies of water in the world. It is also home to some of the largest freshwater fish ever observed in Europe. Wells catfish in the Chernobyl cooling pond have been measured at over 2 meters in length, significantly larger than populations of the same species in uncontaminated water nearby. Tourists visiting the observation bridge throw bread to what appear, from above, to be enormous shadows moving through the water. The catfish have learned to associate the bridge with food and congregate there in large numbers. The reason for their size is almost certainly not the radiation directly. It is the absence of humans. No fishing. No net pressure. No predation by people. The catfish in the cooling pond have been growing in a fully protected environment for nearly 4 decades without any human interference. They are showing us what freshwater fish look like when humans simply leave them alone. What is genuinely unknown is the cumulative effect of 4 decades of radiation exposure on their biology. Studies of the fish's internal organs and genetics are ongoing. Some show elevated mutation rates. Others show surprisingly normal physiology. The cooling pond catfish are, in the most literal sense, still being studied. Science does not yet have a final answer. In the immediate aftermath of the 1986 explosion, the pine forest directly adjacent to the reactor turned red. The trees absorbed such extreme doses of radiation that their cells died while the structures remained standing. A forest of dead red needles that gave the area its name. It was the most contaminated forest ecosystem in history. Then something strange happened. The fallen leaves and trees stopped decomposing. Normally, forests rely on bacteria, fungi, and invertebrates to break down organic matter and return nutrients to the soil. In the red forest, those decomposers had been killed by the radiation. Leaves from 1986 were still sitting on the forest floor in the late 1990s, not rotting, not breaking down. Preserved by the absence of the microbes that would normally eat them, but nature does not accept a vacuum for long. Over the following decades, radiation-resistant fungi, relatives of the black organisms found inside the reactor, began to colonize the dead wood. Slowly, microbial communities adapted to the radiation environment began to re-establish. By the 2000s, decomposition had partially resumed. New pine trees were growing in the red forest. Not the same species, not in the same pattern. But growing, the red forest is not recovered. It is not normal, but it is alive again. And what is growing there now is something that has never existed before in the history of this planet, an ecosystem rebuilt from scratch around the presence of chronic ionizing radiation. In 2015, a landmark study published in Current Biology compared animal populations inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone to those in 4, surrounding uncontaminated nature reserves. The conclusion was not what most scientists expected. Populations of elk, roe deer, red deer, wild boar, and wolves inside the exclusion zone were comparable to, and in the case of wolves, significantly higher than, those in the surrounding reserves. The study found no evidence that radiation was suppressing mammal populations at the zone level. The animals were doing as well inside the radioactive exclusion zone as they were in protected areas with no contamination. The implication is stark. For large mammals in this part of Europe, the impact of human activity, hunting, farming, roads, urban development, noise, light pollution, is more destructive to wildlife populations than chronic, low-level radiation exposure from the worst nuclear accident in history. Chernobyl did not create a dead zone. It accidentally created one of the largest and most effective wildlife sanctuaries in Europe. Over 200 species of birds, brown bears for the first time in a century, lynx, bison, a beaver population that has transformed the river systems. The zone is not safe for humans, but for everything else, it may be the closest thing to paradise currently available in Central Europe. Fungi, eating radiation inside a destroyed reactor. Frogs that turned black to survive. Wolves evolving cancer resistance in real time. The last wild horses on Earth, saved by accident in a place humans declared uninhabitable. We built the most destructive technology in human history, pointed it at a piece of Europe and called it dead. Nature looked at what we'd done and moved in. Subscribe to Nature GPT. Because the natural world is not fragile. It is not passive, and it has been here a great deal longer than we have.